If you'd asked me then I would have said things were fine. Maybe not perfect, but steady. Kelsey and I had been married for almost 6 years, and while there were the usual bumps, we'd made it through more than most. That night, she suggested dinner at Birch and Stone, a high-end place in downtown Austin we used to visit on anniversaries, one of those restaurants with velvet booths, dim lighting, and minimalist art that makes you feel underdressed even in a suit. She made the reservation, said she wanted to reconnect. That word stuck with me, reconnect. I didn't know we'd disconnected. She wore a black dress I hadn't seen before. Her hair was pinned back the way she only did for formal events, and her perfume, something floral and sharp, was so strong it caught in my throat a little. I didn't say anything. I told her she looked beautiful and she smiled, distracted. We were mid-meal when it happened. I was cutting into a cedar plank salmon, trying to keep up with her story about a new CRM system her office was implementing, when her phone buzzed on the table. Just once. No sound, just the glow of the screen. That's when I saw it. You were amazing. Same time tomorrow. It was from someone saved as KD, accounting. She didn't even hesitate. Her fingers snatched the phone so fast it startled me. She locked the screen and slid the phone face down all in one smooth motion. Then, without missing a beat, she said, "Ugh, sorry about that. One of the new kids from accounting, he keeps messaging the wrong group thread. Probably meant that for someone else." I didn't respond right away. I was still stuck on the phrasing. You were amazing. Same time tomorrow? That wasn't the kind of message you send to a group thread or a colleague unless you're incredibly reckless or you just don't care anymore. I don't remember a KD in accounting, I said carefully, hoping she wouldn't notice the edge in my voice. Her eyes flicked up from her napkin. Are you serious? She said, half laughing. You're going to get jealous over some intern's typo? That's so typical. Typical. That word again. She said it the way a disappointed teacher would address a student who never quite lived up to expectations. She didn't even try to reassure me, just deflected, dismissed, and moved on. But what came next stunned me more than the message. She leaned back in her seat, glanced around the restaurant with a kind of theatrical air, and said loud enough for the couple next to us to hear, "Honestly, I think it's cute that you get so paranoid. But maybe if you paid more attention to how you present yourself, you wouldn't feel so insecure." I blinked. What? I mean, look around, she said, gesturing with her wine glass. All the men in here put some effort in. I'm not saying you look bad, but this, she motioned at my shirt, doesn't scream confidence. I looked down. I was wearing a button-up and slacks, same thing I'd worn to work. Nothing flashy, but not sloppy. Just me. You're really going to criticize how I dress right now? I asked quietly. She smiled, slow and deliberate, and sipped her wine. Just trying to help. I stared at her, trying to find the version of Kelsey I used to know in the woman across from me. There was something off about the whole interaction, like she had practiced that moment in her head before it happened. That wasn't just a random comment, it felt like strategy. She had taken a message that clearly raised suspicion, flipped it into an accusation against me, then piled on just enough public embarrassment to shut me down. The way she shifted the energy, it was like she had a playbook for this. The server approached to ask if we wanted dessert. I barely heard him. Kelsey, with a breezy smile, said, "We'll just take the check, thanks." I should have said something else. I should have pressed her. But I didn't. I smiled politely, nodded to the waiter, and said nothing. I felt like a guest at my own marriage. The rest of the night was a blur. She chatted about new projects at work, threw in a joke about one of her friends dating someone, incredibly boring, then scrolled through her phone while I paid the bill. I remember walking back to the car, her heels clicking on the pavement, and thinking, something's wrong. Something already happened and I'm just now waking up to it. She didn't hold my hand. Not once. And I didn't ask why. In the car, she turned on a playlist, some lo-fi stuff she always said helped her zone out. We drove in silence most of the way home, and the whole time I kept seeing the message in my head. You were amazing. Same time tomorrow? No emoji. No punctuation flub. Just clean, confident betrayal. At a red light, I looked over at her. She was staring out the window, her face unreadable in the streetlight glow. I thought about asking again, about pushing just a little harder. But instead, I turned the music down and said, "I think we should talk when we get home." She didn't look at me. "I'm really tired," she said. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" I nodded. But deep down, I knew what tomorrow would bring. Another excuse, another redirection, another dig wrapped in concern. Whatever was going on, Kelsey had already decided I wasn't part of it. She just hadn't figured out how to let me know yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there staring at the ceiling while Kelsey breathed evenly beside me, already a world away. Her back was turned as usual, the blanket cocooned around her like armor. I thought I knew her sleeping patterns like I knew the lines of my own palm, but lately even those had started to shift. She moved more. Restless. Sometimes she whispered things in her sleep, half-formed sentences that made no sense until I started piecing them together like clues I didn't want to find. It's funny how you can trace back 1,000 red flags in hindsight like they were neon signs you somehow missed in the moment. That message at the restaurant was just the crack in the glass. The pressure had been building for months. I started remembering things, quiet little moments that didn't register before but now screamed for attention. Like how she started working late. At first, it made sense. New fiscal quarter, reorganizations, endless meetings with department heads. I even encouraged it. Brought her coffee to her desk. Told her how proud I was. But soon, those meetings started running until 9 p.m., sometimes later. I'd offer to pick her up and she'd decline. "I don't want you waiting around for me," she'd say. "Go relax. You've had a long day too." Then there was her phone. Once upon a time, she left it face up on the kitchen counter while we cooked dinner together. Now it was always on her, tucked in a pocket, slipped under a pillow, or flipped face down on silent. And at night? Airplane mode. She claimed it helped her sleep, that the buzzing kept her up. Maybe that was true. Maybe she really did want peace and quiet. But part of me wonders if it wasn't peace she was after, just a way to hide the noise she didn't want me to hear. I remembered a company function from a few months ago. One of those rooftop mixer things with fancy hors d'oeuvres and open bar cocktails. She introduced me around like a hostess showing off a model home. "This is my husband, Carter," she said, smiling wide. "He's in marketing." That's all I was. No stories, no inside jokes, no warmth. Just a footnote. And then there was him. A man tall, maybe mid-30s, sharp suit and sharper smile, hovered nearby most of the evening. She introduced him so vaguely I forgot his name almost immediately. Something with a K, I think. She didn't linger on it. Just said he was new and then changed the subject. But I remembered their glances. He'd look at her like he already knew her. Not in that flirty, first impression way, but like they shared something private. She didn't meet his eyes long, but when she did, there was this flicker of something, familiarity, maybe. Or guilt. Later, I brought it up in the car. Asked who he was, said he seemed. "I don't know, close." She laughed, called me dramatic, said I was reading into things again. "You always get weird when I'm around other guys," she said, like I was some possessive stereotype. I backed off. She was good at making me feel like the problem. That became a theme. When I expressed concern, she'd flip it. I was jealous. I was insecure. I was making things up. "You need to trust me," she'd say. "I'm not doing anything wrong." And maybe at first she wasn't. Maybe it really was all in my head. But now I'm not so sure. There were other things too. Subtle but consistent. She started buying new clothes, things I'd never seen before. At first, it was just a blouse here, a pair of heels there. But then there were lingerie sets with tags she removed before I could see the price. She said it was retail therapy. Said she just wanted to feel good about herself again. I wanted to believe that. But then I noticed she only wore those things when she was working late. And it wasn't just the clothes. Her moods shifted. She became more impatient, more distant. She stopped asking about my day, stopped laughing at my dumb jokes, stopped reaching for my hand when we sat on the couch. I started to feel like a roommate. One night, I made dinner, her favorite. Lemon chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, steamed asparagus. I lit candles, played the playlist she liked. She came home an hour late, took one look at the table, and sighed. "I'm not really hungry," she said, walking past me. "I had a big lunch." No apology. No thank you. Just silence as she went upstairs to shower. I sat alone at the table and ate my portion. Hers stayed untouched, the steam curling off the plate like a ghost. That night, I asked her if something was wrong, really wrong. I told her I felt like we were drifting. Her response? "You always do this. Every time I get busy, you act like I'm abandoning you. I need space, Carter. I'm allowed to have my own life." And just like that, the conversation ended. I used to think marriage was about weathering storms together. Now, it felt like I was shouting into one, hoping she'd hear me through the wind. The worst part? I still tried. I still kissed her goodnight. I still offered to rub her shoulders when she looked tired. I still asked how her day was, even when I knew the answer would be one-word replies. But with every unanswered question, every sideways glance, every unexplained late night, I felt myself shrinking. I started second-guessing everything. Was I being paranoid? Overly sensitive? Maybe I was the one causing the distance. Maybe if I dressed better, made more money, planned more surprises. But deep down I knew. I knew when she flinched the other night when I reached for her phone. I knew when she changed her passcode and claimed it was for security reasons. I knew when she started sleeping with her back to me and mumbled nothing every time I asked what was on her mind. You don't need proof when the truth is already in your bones. And yet I still held on, because it's hard to let go of someone you love even when they're already gone. It happened 3 days later. I told myself I wasn't going to become one of those people, the ones who snoop, who follow, who spiral. I'd always believed that trust, once broken, should be addressed head-on or left behind entirely. But the problem was I hadn't caught her yet. Not really. I was walking around with a gut full of suspicions and no real proof. Just fragments. Clues. Feelings. And feelings she'd always told me weren't facts. So I decided to get a fact. Thursday night, she said she had to stay late again. End of quarter reports. The team's behind, she explained, breezing past me on her way to the bathroom, and I'm the only one who knows the numbers well enough to clean it up. Her words were smooth, casual, like someone reciting a memorized excuse. But I noticed she was already dressed, not in business casual, but something else. Something softer, tighter, more deliberate. She took extra time doing her makeup. I sat at the kitchen counter, watching the seconds tick off the oven clock. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded when she kissed me goodbye, knowing full well I was going to follow her. I waited 15 minutes. Just enough to give her time to get comfortable. Then I grabbed my keys. It wasn't hard. I knew the apps she used, the routes she usually took. I stayed a few cars behind, took turns slowly, kept the music low. It felt stupid and invasive and so far from who I believed I was, but the part of me that used to trust her had gone quiet. She didn't go to her office. Instead, her car turned off Congress Avenue and rolled into a hotel parking lot, one of those modern boutique places tucked between bars and co-working spaces. It had an unassuming entrance, the kind people use when they don't want to be seen. My chest tightened. This wasn't a meeting. This wasn't work. This was something else. I parked across the street, behind a line of cars, and watched. For a while, nothing happened. I started to wonder if maybe I was wrong, maybe she was here for an event, a company mixer, anything. I watched people come and go, couples, a few solo travelers, a man in a suit on his phone. But no Kelsey. Then the elevator dinged. And there she was. She stepped out with him. The same man from the company event, the one she'd introduced vaguely and then never mentioned again. He wore a gray button-down and jeans, casual but deliberate. She wore the dress I'd seen crumpled at the bottom of her laundry bin last week, the one that didn't match any of her work dinners. They were laughing. Not politely. Not the way you laugh with coworkers. It was warm, effortless, familiar. The way her hand brushed his arm, lightly, like she didn't even realize she was doing it, told me everything I needed to know. She had never touched me like that at work functions. They walked together toward the exit, not holding hands but moving as one. She glanced around as they stepped outside, as if scanning for something. Or someone. I ducked behind the steering wheel and waited. My hands were clammy on the leather grip. I could feel my heart in my teeth. They turned the corner and disappeared. I didn't follow. I just sat there. Sat there for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, I honestly couldn't tell you. Time lost all shape. I could have gone after them, could have walked into that hotel lobby and made a scene, demanded answers, shouted, cried, begged. But I didn't. I didn't need her explanations anymore. I didn't want to hear another lie polished up as reassurance. I had seen what I needed to see. It was all real. I drove home in silence. No music. No podcast. Just the hum of the tires against the road and the quiet roar of betrayal in my ears. When I got home, the house felt different, hollow, like someone had taken the color out of it. I walked straight into the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and took down one of our old wine glasses. The kind we got as a wedding gift. I pulled off my wedding ring and dropped it into the glass. It made the smallest sound, barely more than a clink, but to me it echoed like AG** and SH**T. I left it there on the counter and packed a small bag. Just the essentials, clothes, charger, a few work files. Then I got in my car and drove to my sister's place across town. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. "Carter." I nodded once. She stepped aside without a word and I walked in. We didn't talk that night. I just sat on her couch with a blanket, staring at the wall. She brought me tea. I didn't drink it. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just existed. Somewhere around 3 a.m. I opened my phone and deleted every photo of Kelsey. I don't know why. It wasn't out of anger. It was instinct. Like purging a virus. Each swipe brought me a little closer to a version of myself I hadn't seen in years, someone who wasn't being lied to. By morning I had already decided I wasn't going back. There was no confrontation, no dramatic fight scene, no screaming match. Just the truth. Pure, cold, and undeniable. She had made her choice. All I had to do was accept it. The next day, I sent her a single message. You don't have to explain anything. The glass is in the kitchen. I won't be home. She didn't reply. Not then. But I knew she read it. Kelsey didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't show up at my sister's door crying or apologizing or trying to spin the story like she usually did. For 3 full days, there was nothing. Just absence. And for the first time in what felt like months, I could finally breathe. Silence used to be something I feared. Growing up, silence in our house meant something was coming, a fight, a slammed door, a cold shoulder. So I learned early how to fill the space with noise. Words, distractions, apologies even when I didn't know what I was apologizing for. But the silence? This was different. It was peaceful. I woke up that first morning on my sister's couch to the smell of coffee and a quiet kitchen. No passive-aggressive comments about the laundry. No exaggerated sighs when I left my shoes by the door. Just quiet. She looked up from her laptop when I came in, eyes soft. You okay? I shrugged. Not yet. But better. She nodded like she understood. And somehow that was enough. I stayed there longer than I'd planned. At first, it was just supposed to be a night or two. But with every passing day, the thought of returning to that house, to our house, made my chest tighten. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't want to be that version of myself again. The man who walked on eggshells. The man who rationalized red flags because he didn't want to lose someone who had already left him in every way but physically. Kelsey finally reached out on the 4th day. It was a text. Hey, can we talk? I didn't answer. 3 hours later, another one came in. I made dinner. I'll leave it in the fridge in case you want to come home. I stared at it for a full minute before deleting it. No anger, no reaction. Just gone. That night, I returned to the house not to stay but to reclaim something. I walked through the front door and into a home that now felt like a stranger's. The lights were off. A plate of salmon and risotto set neatly in the fridge, wrapped in foil, labeled with my name. Her handwriting. Her attempt to pretend we were okay. That things were normal. But they weren't. I went upstairs and stood at the threshold of our bedroom. She wasn't in there. Her scent still lingered, though, faint traces of lavender and whatever perfume she'd started wearing lately. I stepped inside, opened the closet, and began pulling her clothes out one by one. Dresses. Blouses. The boots she claimed were too nice for Austin streets. I stacked them into bins I found in the garage and carried them down to the guest room. It wasn't an angry purge. It was intentional. Me drawing a line. I changed the sheets on the bed, flipped the mattress, and opened the windows to let the air breathe. When I was done, I moved my bag into the master bedroom and took a long shower. Not because I planned to stay, but because I needed her to know I was claiming space again. I didn't speak to her when she got home. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom watching me fold a t-shirt. I made your favorite, she said, her voice tentative. I didn't look at her. I saw it. Pause. You could have at least said thank you. Still folding. You're not doing this for me, Kelsey. What's that supposed to mean? I looked up then. Met her eyes. You're not trying to make this right. You're trying to make it go away. Her mouth opened, but no words came. For a moment, I saw the panic behind her practiced calm. I don't want to fight, she said eventually. Then don't. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and left. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the creak of the guest room door opening. Closing. That became our pattern. We lived in the same house, but in separate worlds. She cooked. I didn't eat. She asked how my day was. I walked past her. She tried small touches, her hand on my arm, a casual brush of my shoulder, but I didn't flinch. I didn't react. And that was what unstrung her. Kelsey was never afraid of anger. She could handle a fight. A confrontation gave her something to control, an opening to twist the story, flip the blame, cry at just the right moment. But silence? Silence was a mirror. It forced her to see herself without my commentary. Without defense or explanation. I stopped asking questions. I stopped responding to her texts. I stopped giving her the power to decide when or how we talked. One morning, I came down to find the kitchen spotless, a small tray of muffins on the counter. Her way of softening the air. I picked up the tray, placed it gently in the trash, and walked out the door. That night, she tried again. I was on the couch, scrolling through job listings, part of me wondering if it was time to leave Austin entirely, when she sat beside me. Carter, she said softly. Please. Can we talk? I didn't look at her. We've already had the talk. No, we haven't. You just disappeared. No, I said, setting the phone down. You did. She blinked. What does that mean? I finally turned toward her. You disappeared months ago. You just left a body behind to keep up appearances. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Neither was lying to me. Silence. She reached for my hand and I moved it out of reach. Her face crumbled. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. Yeah, I said. That makes two of us. I stood, grabbed my phone, and headed for the door. Where are you going? She asked. To be around people who don't lie to me. I left her there, sitting alone on the couch with her muffins and her silence. That night, I didn't go far, just a 24-hour diner near the highway. I sat in a booth with a coffee I didn't finish and watched strangers come and go. Nobody knew me there. Nobody expected me to perform or smile or pretend. When I came home, the lights were off. The muffins were gone. And so was the woman who used to make everything feel warm. The next morning, I cleared her belongings out of the master bath. I took down the framed photos, the decorative towels she'd insisted on, the scented candles she never actually used. I packed it all into boxes and slid them into the guest room. Quiet. Efficient. Clean. She didn't say a word about it. And I didn't need her to. Because in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not over her. Not over the outcome. But over myself. And that was enough. It was a Sunday afternoon when she showed up at my brother's house. I was sitting in the backyard with Jordan, both of us nursing coffee that had long gone cold, watching his golden retriever chase shadows. The weather had finally cooled, one of those rare Austin days where the breeze actually feels like a blessing, not a warning. Then we heard the knock. Jordan looked at me. You expecting someone? I shook my head, already knowing. When I opened the front door, there she was, Kelsey. Her hair curled just the way I used to like it, makeup done just enough to look natural, and in her hands, a pie. Homemade. Probably peach. Her specialty, or so she claimed when we were still playing house. Hi, she said softly, her voice carrying that carefully measured vulnerability she saved for special occasions. What are you doing here? She held up the pie like it was an olive branch. I thought we could talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She blinked, clearly expecting an invite in. Carter, please? You could have called, I said. You weren't answering. Exactly. She looked away, exhaled slowly. Can we just sit for a second? I didn't answer, but I stepped to the side. She took it as permission and walked with me to the porch swing. She didn't sit close. There was a pause, pregnant, familiar, strategic. Then she started. I know I messed up, she said. I've been thinking about it nonstop. And I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it out loud. I stared straight ahead. Say what? That I was wrong. That I hurt you. That I broke something I can't fix. I waited, knowing that wasn't the end. Kelsey never stopped at admission, she always reached for redemption. Sure enough, she kept going. I was scared, she said. Of how distant we'd become. Of losing us. And when I met someone who made me feel, she cut herself off. It wasn't real. It wasn't love. It was just attention. And I let it get too far. Too far, I repeated. You mean the hotel? Her eyes widened. You followed me? No. I just happened to be there while you were laughing your way out of an elevator with him. Lucky me. She looked down, her fingers tightening around the pie tin. I didn't sleep with him, she said, almost too quickly. I didn't respond. Not because I believed her, but because the specifics didn't matter anymore. That line, whatever it was, had been crossed long before the hotel. She took a breath, lifted her head. I want to fix this, Carter. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do the work. Therapy. Whatever you need. I don't want to lose us. There it was. The pitch. Wrapped in nostalgia and tears and the kind of vulnerability she used to *p************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** I really looked at her, not as my wife, not as the woman I once adored, but as someone I no longer trusted. I know everything, Kelsey. She blinked. What do you mean? I mean this wasn't just some recent slip. This wasn't a one-time mistake or an emotional fluke. I have the messages. The call logs. The photos. I even tracked your car a few times just to be sure. Her face went pale. You what? I had to know, I said. And now I do. She sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then her expression changed, fear bleeding into something colder, more calculating. I didn't know you were the type to spy, she said, voice suddenly sharper. And I didn't know you were the type to cheat. Here we are. She set the pie down beside her and stood up. This isn't you, Carter. You're not this bitter. No, I said. But I'm finally honest. She took a few steps down the porch, paused at the edge. You're really going to throw everything away? She asked. The house, the life we built? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm letting go of something that was already gone. For a second, I saw something flash in her eyes, panic, maybe. Not heartbreak. Not regret. Just fear of losing control. She looked at me differently then. Like I was no longer predictable. And that scared her more than anything else. The next day, it started. The manipulation. First came the gentle waves, shared calendar invites reappeared. She dropped off a sweater I might need. Left a handwritten note in my mailbox, remember what we survived together. Don't give up on that. I didn't reply. Then came the emotional ambushes, texts at 2 a.m., voicemails where she cried through old memories, even a playlist sent through Spotify titled, Us. I blocked the number. That's when she escalated. She called my mom. I think he's having a breakdown, she said. He's isolating. Pushing everyone away. I'm just trying to help. She told our friends we were working through a rough patch and that I was grieving something unrelated. She painted me as cold. Withdrawn. Unstable. That was her real specialty, not cheating. Not lying. But rewriting the narrative before I could write my own. It almost worked. Almost. But then I started sharing the truth. Quietly. Calmly. To the right people. I showed my brother the logs. I forwarded her texts to my best friend. And when my mom asked me why I wasn't fighting for my marriage, I sat her down and told her the entire story, no anger, no embellishment. Just the facts. By the end of it, she was crying. Not for Kelsey. For me. The sympathy Kelsey tried to build? It unraveled fast. When she realized she'd lost the narrative, she switched to threats. If you walk away like this, she said in one message, you'll regret it. I know things. I can make this really messy. I saved the message and didn't reply. The next day, I got a call from a lawyer, hers. She was making demands. Spousal support. Half the house. Partial ownership of the business I started 2 years before we even met. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I handed everything over to my attorney and said 5 words that felt like freedom. Give her what she wants. Because what she wanted wasn't the house or the money or the stuff. What she wanted was control. And the one thing she couldn't take back was the fact that I'd stopped caring. The divorce moved quickly. I didn't stall, didn't counter, didn't flinch. My attorney was efficient and clinical, just the way I needed him to be. I signed every paper the moment it hit my inbox. House? Hers. The car we shared? Hers too. Most of the savings? Gone. People thought I was crazy. You're letting her win, they said. But it didn't feel like losing. Not anymore. Because what they didn't understand was that none of it mattered to me now. Not the leather sectional we picked out after her promotion. Not the kitchen she renovated without asking. Not even the backyard we once dreamed of turning into a nursery. That life wasn't mine anymore. It was a story that ended the night I saw her walk out of that elevator, laughing with a man who knew her better than I did. What I wanted now was simple, peace. She tried to nice sympathy in the meantime, called old friends, posted vague messages online about healing and moving forward after betrayal. But her script was unraveling and the people who mattered knew the truth. I didn't show up for the final hearing. My lawyer handled everything. She expected drama, a confrontation, a final emotional plea. She got silence. And sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can leave behind. 3 months later, I walked into Birch and Stone again. Same place, same corner table by the window, but everything was different. I was different. No ring. No expectations. No rehearsed smiles. Across from me sat Mallory. We'd met months ago, briefly back when she was tending bar on weekends and writing short stories during the week. I remembered her because she listened like most people don't. Not to respond, not to fix, just to hear you. Now she was getting published. A local magazine had picked up one of her essays and she'd invited me to the release party. I almost didn't go. But that night, watching her speak with quiet confidence, something in me clicked. I remembered what it felt like to be seen without being studied. Loved without being managed. Our conversation over dinner was simple. No grand declarations. No probing into the past. Just 2 people in the present, sharing food and moments and the quiet recognition that we'd both come through something. She asked me if I wanted dessert. I smiled. Yeah. Let's stay a little longer. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I didn't need to. I was home. And it had nothing to do with where I was sitting.